Hey guys, it's Tyler from The Line Change, coming at you with a game recap video for tonight's Golden Knights and Vancouver Canucks game. Apologies for the lateness on this. Ended up being at Fan Expo longer than I had anticipated, and then it also took me a while to get home. I actually ended up missing the entirety of the first period. Managed to get home I believe it was shortly after the second period started, and as you can see behind me, I quickly turned it on. But let's break down this game, and unfortunately, it's a loss for the Canucks coming out of the Four Nations break, which is a drag, as prior to the break, they had managed to win 3 straight and had a whole bunch of momentum going into the break, and unfortunately, they weren't able to keep that momentum here tonight. Granted, they were facing, the Golden Knights, who are one of the best, if not the best, teams in the Pacific so far this season. Vegas is 34-17-6 so far this season, while the Canucks are 26-19-11 after tonight. And yeah, it's disappointing with the loss, but I still feel as though the Canucks played a pretty solid game, considering, a majority of the Canucks just had a 2-week break. Obviously, Lankinen played in the Four Nations. PD played in the Four Nations, so they didn't exactly get a break. And actually, prior to puck drop, people were under the impression that PD was not going to play tonight, along with Quinn Hughes. And then obviously, within like 10 minutes before the game started, I got the notification on my phone saying that PD was playing, as I have PD in several of my fantasy leagues, so I get those notifications on whether someone's out or day-to-day or if they're in. And yeah, but unfortunately for me and my fantasy team, I wasn't able to get them in prior to the game starting. Although, not to mention, the last 2 weeks I've practically forgotten about fantasy because it's been 2 weeks, and luckily in Yahoo they have it extended, so it goes until, I believe, sometime next week. So yay for that. Unfortunately, one of my other leagues that I'm in, that's actually ESPN, they didn't do that. So they've basically had a week, this current ongoing week started February 3rd and ends tomorrow. Well, as of this recording, technically today. So I think that's a bit of a drag, and I am losing in that league. I was not losing by much prior to Saturday night. Now I'm losing by a lot more, so I have basically one more day to try and, pull one out of the hat, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, back to the game. As I mentioned, I did miss the first period. Just glancing at a little bit of recap here. I also was browsing through Twitter to try and get, updates on the game as I was on my way home. I did see that the Canucks drew not one, but too many men on the ice penalties in the span of 10 minutes, which is really bad. The fact that you get called for one too many men on the ice penalty and then a second one in the same period, like, come on. Like, that is, I did see a little bit of flack for Tyler Myers on Twitter. A lot of people were calling him out in regards to that particular penalty, even though he didn't serve it. It was Nils Höglander who served both of them. And then, of course, Myers did have that delay of game penalty on his part. I'm not going to tear into Myers on that. I'm not going to really go overboard. Yes, it was dumb on his part. It was a bad play on his part. But prior to this game, he's been incredible. He's played some of, I'd like to think, the best hockey he's played in a Canucks jersey. Since he returned from his suspension, he's been great. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. For this one game, he did just have 2 weeks off, so obviously he should have been well rested. He just needs to get his legs back underneath him. So I'm going to give him a bit of a free pass for this. But continuing on, obviously in the first period, there was no scoring. Kevin Lankinen really stood on his head in that first period. From what I've, the highlights I've seen, he really made sure that this was a scoreless game going into the second period. So already, after having inked that extension, he's already, showing the team, this is why you chose to believe in me. And he's proving that he deserved that contract. I mean, honestly, to me, he had already proved it with his play up until this point. But now that he's got that contract, he doesn't have to worry about signing a new contract. He doesn't, all that is put behind him. Now he can just focus on playing hockey. And that's exactly what he did in that first period. He really stood on his head. Kudos to Kevin Lankinen for that. Moving on to the second period, which is about when I got home. I managed to, quickly get home, get sorted, and then turned on the TV. As you can see behind me, it's still up on there. Managed to get it, started watching it, quickly ate something too. And then, so second period, and then first goal of the game is for the Canucks. So it seems like a flip, or rather a switch has flipped. As you know, at the beginning of the season, the Canucks were constantly getting scored on first. Constantly at the start of the season. But it seems like lately, they've flipped that. Now they're the ones scoring first, which is great, which is awesome. They've flipped that narrative now. So the Canucks score first at 6 minutes and 22 seconds of the second period. And it's, lo and behold, Jake DeBrusk who scores. I mentioned in our DeBrusk video, if he got a point here tonight, it would be his 300th of his career. And what do you know? He comes through and he gets it right out of the gate. Like, attaboy. So yeah, Jake DeBrusk scores his 20th of the season. Remember how I mentioned in that video on whether or not he can get to 30 goals? Well, now he's only 10 away from that. And he's got 27 games left in the season. I think he can definitely hit that mark. So Jake, 20th of the season, assisted by Sherwood and Carson Soucy. Now, Sherwood, that was a beautiful pass by Kiefer Sherwood. That was great. I love how Aiden Hill tried to do a sweep check with his stick, missed it, and Sherwood was able to find DeBrusk right there, and he popped it home. So that was a great goal. Obviously, unfortunately, at 11 minutes and 2 seconds, Ivan Barbashev scored his 16th of the season, assisted by Victor Olofsson and Caden Korzak. That was a bit of a tough one. I mentioned how Lankinen had really stood on his head in that first period. I'm not going to blame Lankinen for that goal, at least not entirely. I do feel as though on that goal, he was a little too aggressive. And speaking as, a goalie, at least when I was younger, when I actually played hockey, so I know a little bit about, being a goalie, not too much. By no means am I saying was I a professional, but I understood, being a goalie and, over-committing on a save, and that's exactly what Lankinen did. He over-committed and left a juicy rebound for Barbashev, who tucked it home. So, scores 1-1, and then that was all the scoring for the second period. Coming into the third period, 18 seconds in, Brandon Saad scored his second of the season, or is it since he signed with Vegas? But either way, Brandon Saad gets Vegas the lead again, assisted by Zach Whitecloud and Brett Howden. At 19:29 of the third period, Tomas Hertl scores an empty net goal, assisted by Brett Howden and Nicholas Roy. I do remember seeing when I was watching, the Canucks were getting outshot completely. I think I remember seeing at one point the Canucks only had 8 shots, and that was in the second period, and they were completely getting outshot by the Golden Knights. I feel as though that's a recurring thing that we've seen a little too much this season. The Canucks constantly getting outshot. Granted, by the end of the game, they, for the most part, seem to catch up, but for the first 2 periods of the game, they're not shooting enough, or they're not getting enough pucks on net. So I feel as though they really need to turn that around and start actually putting pucks on net. I know a lot of the shots get blocked, and that's, not on them at all. Actually, just reading the stats here, Vegas had 19 blocked shots that game. So they were blocking a lot of shots. So if those shots hadn't been blocked, we could have had a different game. But for the most part, I felt from what I saw, the Canucks played really well. I saw that speed from like guys like Keedle and O'Connor, something that they brought to this team since being acquired. Going over the stats here. So the final shots were 35-34 in favor of Vegas. Hits were 34-10 in favor of the Canucks. Wow. Like, that's interesting there. I don't have like player by player stats when it comes to the hits, but I'm pretty sure a majority of those 34 hits were most likely Kiefer Sherwood, who I remember seeing on the broadcast them saying he's the fastest to reach 300 hits, managing to do it in 52 games. Hats off to Kiefer Sherwood. He continues to rack up the hits, which is great for my fantasy league, as I do have Sherwood, although I believe I had him benched. Faceoffs were dead even, 28 apiece. As I mentioned with the power plays, Canucks were 0 for 2 on the power play, and Vegas was 0 for 3. So neither power play really was all that spectacular tonight for either side. Only minutes 10-8 for the Canucks. 10 minutes in penalties for the Canucks, 8 for the Vegas Golden Knights. 12-16 in giveaways. So the Canucks had the edge there, and when it came to giveaways, it seemed like Vegas was giving the puck away a lot tonight. Takeaways 5-3 in favor of the Canucks. Then, as I mentioned with the block shots, 19-17 in favor of Vegas. The penalty summary. Now, we may as well cover this. Obviously, first period, 2 minutes for too many men on the ice, served by Nils Höglander at 3 minutes and 37 seconds of the first period. And then at 10 minutes and 48 seconds, there's that second too many men on the ice penalty, once again served by Nils Höglander. At 15:49 of the first period, Myers is off for 2 minutes for delay of game. Only one penalty in the second period on Vegas, 7 minutes and 8 seconds. Ivan Barbashev, 2 minutes for hooking. And then the third period, we had a bit of a slew of penalties here. At 7 minutes and 16 seconds, 2 minutes for unsportsmanlike conduct for Filip Hronek, 2 minutes for roughing on Filipino, 2 minutes for roughing on Alex Pietrangelo, 2 minutes for roughing on Nicholas Hag, and then at 15 minutes and 11 seconds, 2 minutes for hooking on Pavel Dorofeyev. So those were the penalties tonight. Pretty low-key when I came to penalties in this first game out of the break. As I mentioned before, I did quite like the Canucks' game tonight. I thought they had some really good chances, but they were just beaten by Adin Hill, who was really good tonight. All things considered, Adin Hill hasn't played in like 2 weeks. Yes, Adin Hill was on Team Canada for the Four Nations, but he didn't play a single game. Canada relied on Jordan Binnington that entire tournament. Played every single game in that tournament. They had Sam Montembeault as another goalie on Team Canada. He didn't play either. So the two backup goalies for Team Canada didn't play a single game in that tournament. They just, well, at least in Hill's case, he just sat on the bench the entire time. So obviously Hill was very well rested, but, with goalies especially, you can't sit out for too long as you get, cold, and it's always good to play instead of sitting. If you sit for too long, it's not all that good, especially when it comes to goalies, as I mentioned. So Hill was great tonight. I thought he made some major big saves for the Golden Knights. Yes, there was a couple disallowed goals on the Canucks. One of them, I do agree there was goaltender interference on Blueger's part, but part of me also feels as though that was a little weak. There was barely any contact. Yes, Blueger was in the blue paint, but he just grazed him. It's not like Hill got knocked down when there was contact. Blueger just kind of fell behind him, and then Höglander shot the puck into the net. So I'm a little 50-50 on that. I don't know if that should have been called back. Yes, there was the interference, but again, it's very minor grazing. And then there was that second one with Dakota Joshua. I've seen the back and forth on whether or not it should have been a goal or not. I've seen some people like Elliot Friedman, going off and basically saying, that should not be a goal. Actually, rather, that was the other one he was going off on after the game. And, him and Kelly Harudi were going back and forth on that. But this Joshua goal, yes, the whistle blew before the puck crossed the line. But I also feel as though, from comments I've seen on Twitter as well, I also feel as though the whistle was blown a little too quickly. And just seeing the highlights, it seemed like Hill didn't know where the puck was. You can clearly see it's underneath his pad, but he doesn't have control of it. If a player is able to easily, jam the puck, like underneath your pad, and you don't have it securely, it should be a good goal, and the whistle should not be blown until for sure the goalie has the puck. And I do feel as though, if that goal had counted, this probably would have been a different game. Can't always win. The referees made their decision, and I do feel as though I should have at least attempted to challenge it. But we all know Rick Tocchet, he's not a big challenger. I think I've seen him challenge something once, maybe this season. He's just not really big on that unless definitively they know they can win, which is understandable. But yeah, I do feel as though, in my personal opinion, that goal should have counted. But, it is what it is, and we move on. So the final score in this game, Canucks lose 3-1. The last goal being an empty netter, as I mentioned. So this is, I would definitely say, a tough loss for the Canucks. I would say it completely halts their momentum that they had carried into the break. They play again tomorrow against Utah Hockey Club. It'll be interesting to see what Rick Tocchet decides to do with the goalies, whether or not he'll throw Lankinen back in, as by the end of this game, Lankinen had quite the workload. He faced a lot of shots. I mentioned it was 35 shots, made 32 saves on 33 saves. And yeah, so perhaps we'll see the Artie Party playing tomorrow against Utah. Although I would say tomorrow's game against Utah is more important than tonight's game, when it comes to winning, as Utah is right on our butts in the wild card race. But luckily for us, Utah also lost tonight in regulation. So there's that. They didn't collect any points. But I would definitely say tomorrow is a must win. They need to not drop 2 more points. They already dropped 2 points tonight. They can't afford to lose 2 more tomorrow. So definitely a must win. So that begs the question, should Tocchet go back to Lankinen despite the heavy workload he had tonight, or should he start Seelovs, and then if Seelovs craps the bed, throw Lankinen in? No, but fingers crossed that's not the case. Whichever goalie ends up starting tomorrow, the Canucks can come out hot right out of the gate and pick up a solid 2 points tomorrow. We're going to do another game recap tomorrow. Tomorrow's won't be as late as I'll be home, although I did think about potentially going to Fan Expo again tomorrow, but I would have to buy a ticket. I'm still kind of debating it, although it ends at 5 and the game is at 5. So maybe I won't. We'll see. But anyway, that's going to do it for tonight's game recap. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be a bit more organized when it comes to doing the recap. And who knows, maybe I'll actually this time, actually write some notes, for the first period, second period, third period. Then I can always rely on the game stats for the entirety of the game, and then I can have written down each period and things that I noticed. But that's going to do it for this game recap video. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you're not subscribed to this channel, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. You really help out the channel, and then also, if you hit that bell, you get notified if any new content comes out. Earlier in the day, I'm going to be dropping some more content. I did a bunch of that earlier before I went to Fan Expo. I dropped a bunch of content. I'm going to do that again tomorrow. Same thing on Monday. And yeah, that's going to do it for this recap video. I'll see you guys in the next video.